Breathe! Breathe! Crawl to my voice! Do not stand up!
Jules Odom shoved a 9-year-old boy up through the black hole in the ice with the flat of his hand. And the boy came up with no scream in him at all, just an open mouth and no air, because the cold had already stolen the breath he'd need to make the sound.
Flat! Stay flat, ham. Spread out like a starfish and pull yourself to the man yelling. The ice is rotten pay. We don't have the sled. The airboat's 20 minutes. You go under that shelf and you do not come back up. You are not equipped. Wait. Then get him. I've got the other one. There is no other one. It's just the... There were two.
Jewel had already seen the thing the fireman hadn't. 40 yards out, past the red thin ice sign nobody had read, a single red wool hat drifting slow across the white. Drifting because there was a current under this lake where a frozen lake should have none, and the current had the second boy now, and it was walking him sideways under 3 solid inches of ice toward a place with no hole to come up through. "There's another one down here," Jewel said, not to the fireman, to the water, and he went back under. In 90 seconds, it wouldn't matter how good anyone was, because the boy would breathe, because that's what a body does at the end. It breathes whether there's air or not. People think the danger under ice is the cold. But the cold is slow and the ice is fast. The ice is a ceiling. You cannot swim up. Up is a locked door 40 acres wide. Lose the hole and you've lost the only exit in the world, and you claw at the white underside in the dark until you can't. The divers find them in spring, an arm's length from a solid roof. Jules knew all of this the way other men know their phone number, because he had been the diver who came in the spring. More than once, the one to find the reaching hand, the face turned up toward a door that would never open. He'd put that knowledge in a box 8 years ago and sworn he'd never open it again. And here he was, lungs burning, opening it, because a red hat was drifting and there was a boy under it. He didn't fight the current. You never do. It's bigger than you and it doesn't tire. He read it. The pull along his ribs, the grains of silt lit by the gray glow through the ice, and let it take him the way it was taking the boy, quartering under the ceiling, hunting the small dark shape ahead. And then the box opened all the way it always threatened to. And it was not this lake. It was another lake, 14 years gone, and it was not a stranger's child ahead of him in the dark. It was his brother, Isaac, 12 years old, the same black water, the same white ceiling, Jules reaching the same way and never closing the distance. And a voice at the very bottom of him, exhausted and almost kind, said the thing it had waited 14 years to say. "You know how this ends. You lost one to this exact water. You'll lose this one too. Stop swimming, let it take him. It's easier than doing it again. Let go." For 3 seconds, Jules Odom stopped kicking. 3 seconds under the ice, with a boy's life closing to nothing in front of him, and the whole grief of his life pulling backward like a second current. And he drifted, and he almost let the dark have it, almost let himself sink into the old familiar failure like a man lying down in snow. Then the awl bit into his palm. He kept them on a cord around his neck. 2 steel ice awls with wooden handles, the picks every person on frozen water is supposed to carry and almost no one does. The tool you drive into the ice to drag yourself out when you've gone through. In the drift, his fist had closed on them, and the steel point opened a thin, hot line across his palm, and the small, clean pain was a voice too, louder than the other one, saying the only prayer he'd ever really believed in. "All's down, you come up." He came up, not through the ice, there was no hole, but up out of the grief, back into his own hands, and he kicked hard, and he closed the distance, and his fingers found the boy's coat. The boy was not moving. Small, limp, a rag doll turning in the current. Jules got an arm across his chest from behind, put his back to the ceiling, and drove one awl up into the ice. No one on the shore would quite believe it when Hollis described it later. You cannot break 3 inches of ice from below with a fist, but you can score it. Drive a steel pick into the same spot, again and again, chipping a weakness into the ceiling while your air runs out. A man hammering upward at a locked white door with a boy dying against his chest. "Stay with me," he told the limp boy against his chest, the words lost in bubbles, meaning them anyway. "Not this one, you hear me? Not this one." Once. His lungs were fists. Twice. The gray light swam. Come on, come on." 3 times, and not a crack ran out from the point like a struck window. He drove the second awl into it, levered his whole weight down, and the ice gave a jagged, wet mouth of broken plates, and he shoved the boy up through it first, smallest up first, into the flat winter daylight, and then got his own forearms over the broken edge and did not have the strength to follow. "I've got him! Got him!" Hollis had crawled out on a ladder laid flat across the rotten ice, spreading the weight, and had the small boy by the arm, dragging him shoreward. "Odom, give me your hand." Jules's hands wouldn't close. The last betrayal of the cold, which takes your hands last and completely, so a man who's just chipped through a ceiling to save a life can drown at the lip of the hole. He slid back. The current took his legs, patient, and he thought with a flat clarity that this was almost right, almost the correct ending to a story that began 14 years ago. One brother down through the ice after another, and then a boat hook caught his collar, and Hollis Marsh, 60 years old and roaring like a much younger man, hauled him up onto the ladder by main strength and dragged them both to the shore where the second boy was already coughing lake water into the snow. "Two," Jules said to no one, teeth chattering so hard it barely came out. "I got two. Both of them?" "Both of them," Hollis said, kneeling over him. "Both breathing. You hear me, Odom? Both of them are alive." Two boys, both on the bank in the arms of strangers, while the man who'd gone under 3 times lay on his back in the snow, staring at a white sky, unable for a long moment to do anything but shake. "Where?" Hollis said, kneeling over him, stripping off his own coat to throw on top of Jules. "Did you learn to do that?" Jules got an elbow under himself. The two boys were being carried up the bank toward the flashing lights that had finally arrived, and he watched them go, counting them the way he counted everything twice. 2 of them, both moving, before he answered. "I fixed the cold storage," Jules said, "down at the co-op." "A man who fixes freezers doesn't score ice from underneath with a handpick," Hollis said. "That's not a thing people know. That's a thing people are trained to. Years of it. Nobody in this county could have done what you just did. Not me. Not the volunteer squad. Nobody. I fixed the cold storage. I watched you make a hole in the ceiling of a lake, underwater, with your air gone, and put a child through it. Where does a man learn that?" "I fixed the cold storage," Jules said a third time, and the flatness of it closed the door. And Hollis, who'd been doing this long enough to know when a man tells you the truth and a lie in the same 4 words, let it close. For now. That was when the boy's mother reached them. She came across the snow at a dead run. "Sammy, oh God, baby," and folded over the silver-wrapped shape of her son. And the sound she made was the one every parent keeps loaded in their chest and prays they die without firing. Jules knew that sound. He'd made it once himself, at the edge of a different lake. And he looked away, because some griefs are not yours to watch. And then she looked up. Over the silver-wrapped shape of her son, Maren Voss looked across the trampled snow at the man who had gone under the ice 3 times and come up with her boy. And Jules waited for the thing that usually comes next. The thank you, the weeping gratitude, the hand grabbed and held too hard. It didn't come. What crossed Maren Voss's face when she looked at Jules Odom was not gratitude. It was fear. Naked, cornered, calculating fear. There and gone in a half a second. And Jules was too cold and too emptied out to understand it, and he filed it the way he filed the wrong current under the ice. A thing that did not belong, a thing that meant something he didn't have time to read yet. Then the paramedics were on him too, and the day came apart into blankets and questions and the long, violent shivering of a body coming back from the edge of the cold. And he did not think about the look on the mother's face again until it was far too late. At the hospital that night, before any of it went wrong, the little one was awake when Jules looked in. Sammy, small in the big bed, not afraid. "So, you're the one who got me," Sammy said. "Under the ice. I remember your hands. It was dark down there. I thought nobody was coming." "Somebody was always coming." Jules said it very quietly from the doorway. "You remember that. If you're ever in the dark like that again, somebody's always coming. You just hold on till they get there." "Were you scared?" "A little, but I'd been in cold water before. I knew the way out." "How?" "Long story, for when you're bigger." He tapped the doorframe. "Sleep, Sammy. You held on. You did good." And Sammy smiled at him. A real smile, the last uncomplicated thing that would ever pass between them. Because in 3 days, his mother would put a sentence in his mouth, and this man would become, in the boy's own testimony, the villain. It was the cruelest kind of peace, the kind you only recognize once it's gone. Pia Odom was 10, and she knew her father was late before the truck pulled in, because the co-op light had gone off at the regular time and he still wasn't home, and her father was never late for a reason that was small. She was at the window when the truck came and saw him get out slow, like a much older man, hair frozen into spikes, a fire blanket around his shoulders, and had the door open before he reached the porch. "You went in the water," she said. Not a question. Pia asked very few questions. Reading her father told her more than asking ever had. "I did. Both of them? The kids? Both of them. They're okay." "Are you okay?" I'm okay, Pia. You're shaking. I'm cold. That's all. That's all it is. She looked at him a while longer, at the blanket, at the way his hands wouldn't quite hold still. And then she stepped back to let him in, and she said the thing that told him she'd already understood the shape of it. Did you go on the ice? Jules stopped in the doorway, because his daughter knew the part that mattered. Her father did not go on the ice. Not the pond behind the school. Not the shortcut that would have saved 20 minutes. Never. 3 years, and he'd never once set foot on frozen water. Pia was the only person alive who'd asked why, and he'd told her only the smallest true piece. That he'd had a brother named Isaac, and Isaac had been 12. I went on the ice, Jules said. Pia absorbed this. He could see a large thing to her, larger than the near drowning, because the ice was the one line her father had drawn around his whole life, and today he'd stepped over it. For the boys, she said, working it out. For the boys. Because nobody else would. Because nobody else could. That was brave, she'd said quietly. And also really dumb. Yeah, a breath that was almost a laugh. Both of those. She came and put her arms around his middle, blanket and frozen coat and all, and held on. And Jules put his ruined hand on the back of her head and held his daughter in the doorway of their small warm house, and could not have known that 2 miles away, another parent was sitting on the edge of another child's bed, beginning out of a fear as old as his own, to build the lie that would take all of this away. Here is what Maren Voss was afraid of. Maren was 38, cleaned rooms at the Highway Motel on the 6 to 2 shift, and was 4 months into a custody fight she was losing. Her ex had a lawyer, a new wife, a finished basement. She had a night shift and a sitter who charged by the hour. The drum the ex's lawyer beat in every filing was that Maren left an 8-year-old under-supervised to clean rooms in the dark. It wasn't fair. It also wasn't wrong. And that was the part that kept her up at 2 in the afternoon. On the day the ice broke, the sitter canceled. And Maren, one written warning from losing the job the custody fight required her to keep. Let Sammy go 2 doors down to play with Ben Truitt. Told the Truitt boy's older cousin to watch them. Told the 2 little ones. She remembered saying it. She'd remember it the rest of her life. To stay off the lake, and drove to work. They had not stayed off the lake. And a man had gone under 3 times to undo a choice that, traced back, was hers. Standing on that bank with her living son in her arms, Maren understood 2 things at once. The understanding that put the look on her face Jules had filed and not read. First, she owed that man everything. Second, if anyone ever asked how 2 8-year-olds came to be out past a thin ice sign on a Tuesday afternoon, the answer led to a mother who'd sent her child onto a frozen lake unsupervised, and that answer, in front of a judge already primed to believe it, would end her. She'd lose Sammy, not for a weekend, for good. And so, on the edge of her son's bed that night, Maren Voss did the smallest, most unforgivable arithmetic there is. She had a son to keep. There was a stranger who'd already been in the water. A big quiet man nobody knew, whose only defense was his own word. If someone else had told the kids the ice was safe, no one would ask why a mother wasn't watching. The blame would have a different address. He's a hero, she whispered to the dark. Heroes survive things. A rumor won't touch a man like that. A pause. Nobody needs it like I need it. Nobody. None of it was true, and some part of her knew, and she kept whispering it until it was solid enough to stand on. Then she woke her son up gently, and she started teaching him what to say. Sammy, baby, look at mama. I need you to do something for me, and it's important, and it's grown up, okay? The boy blinked up at her, foggy. Okay? What? When people ask you about the lake, the police, the men who write things down, I need you to tell them something. I need you to say the man told you it was okay to go out there. The big man. I need you to say he told you the ice was safe. Sammy's small face folded in confusion, because even at 8, even half asleep, he knew the shape of a wrong thing. But he didn't. He was the one who... I know, baby. I know what he did. Maren's voice cracked and she pushed it down. But you have to say it anyway. That's a lie, though. Lying's bad, you said. I know I said that. I know. She held his face. But this one time it keeps us together. If you don't say it, Sammy, look at me. They take you away from mama. They say mama's a bad mother and they take you and I never see you again. Is that what you want? No. Then say the man told you it was safe. Say it so they don't take you. Please, baby. Do it for mama. And Sammy Voss, 8 years old, loving his mother with his whole undefended heart, with no idea the words in his mouth were a loaded gun aimed at the man who'd chipped through a ceiling of ice to give him back his life. Sammy nodded. Okay, mama, he said. I'll say it. Maren held her son and wept into his hair. Some of it relief and some of it a shame, so large it would take years to find the bottom of. And outside the window, the lake lay flat and white and patient under the moon, keeping, as it always did, a perfect record of everything that had happened on it and under it, waiting for someone to think to ask. A rumor in a small town travels like weather. Nobody decides to spread it, and everybody does. It comes in under the doors. By the end of the week, the story over Harrow Lake was not about a man who saved two boys. It was about a man who'd told them the ice was safe and then had to save them from his own bad advice. Almost worse than doing nothing, people said. At least a man who does nothing didn't send them out there. Where'd he even come from, this Odom? Nobody really knows him. Just showed up 3 years ago. Keeps to himself. Big fella. Something not right about a man that quiet, you ask me. My wife never did feel easy about him at the co-op. Couldn't say why. And you heard it was the little Voss boy himself who said it? Out of his own mouth. A child wouldn't make that up. Jules felt it the way you feel a cold front, a pressure change before the storm is visible. The cashier at the market, who used to nod, stopped nodding. A woman he'd fixed a chest freezer for in October crossed the street, and did it with a little apologetic smile, which was somehow worse, because it meant she'd thought about it and decided. A man at the hardware counter asked, loudly enough to be heard, whether they were still letting that fella work around the kids' skating days. And on Thursday, the manager of the co-op, a decent man named Pruitt who couldn't quite meet his eyes, found him by the compressors. Jules, I'm gonna need you to take a few days, just till it settles. Till what settles? You know what? People are talking. What are they saying, Pruitt? Say it to me. Pruitt studied his clipboard. That you told those boys the ice was safe. That the Voss kid said so himself. And you believe an 8-year-old over 3 years of me showing up and fixing your compressors at 4 in the morning. I don't know what I believe. That's the problem. Pruitt finally looked up, miserable. It's bad for the co-op. It's nothing personal, Jules. Take the week, please. Don't make me say it twice. They're saying I told those boys the ice was safe, Jules said. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. I'm not saying you did anything. I'm saying people are talking. Pruitt studied his own clipboard. The Voss boys telling folks you said it. Kid that age, hard to argue with. And there it was. The thing that shut Jules Odom's mouth and kept it shut. The accusation was coming out of the mouth of a child. You do not call an 8-year-old a liar. Not in public, not to save yourself, not when you are a large black man in a small white town and the child is small and frightened and just came back from the dead. There was no version of, I didn't say it, that didn't end with him standing over a traumatized little boy, insisting the boy was lying. Jules had spent his whole life making himself smaller so rooms wouldn't fear him. He was not going to do the one thing guaranteed to make this room afraid. So he said nothing. He took the days off. He walked the long way home around the lake, the way he always did. The only person who came to the house was Hollis Marsh. He stood on the porch with his hat in his hands, the old volunteer fireman, and he didn't come in. I'm going to ask you something, Hollis said, and I want you to know I already know the answer. I just need to hear you say it. Did you tell those boys the ice was safe? No. Did you say one word to them before they went in the water? I never saw them till I heard the ice go. I was inside the co-op. Hollis nodded slowly, turning his hat. That's what I figured, because I've watched you 3 years, Odom. You won't cross the pond behind the school. You walk 40 minutes around the inlet when 5 would do. A man that's scared of ice does not send children out onto it. He put his hat back on. The town's got it wrong. I don't know how to fix that yet. But I know it's wrong, and I'm not going to stand in that town hall and let it stay wrong. That's a promise. Why? Jules said. Why go against the whole town for a man you don't know? Because I had your collar in a boat hook, Hollis said simply. I felt what it cost you to go under that ice. A guilty man doesn't pay that. Good night, Odom. And the town read his silence as the thing it already wanted to believe. But there was one man now, reading it right. The county opened a routine safety review, and the interview was where Jules's silence became the wall he'd nearly die behind, a town office conference room. Jules, a safety officer named Reyes with a legal pad, Hollis, and, because it concerned the children, the Voss boy and his mother. Marin sat with her arm around Sammy and did not look at Jules once. Reyes was not unkind. He was thorough, which is a different thing. Mr. Odom, you're not accused of anything criminal. This is a safety review. But I have to establish the sequence. He tapped his pad. There's a persistent account that the children were told the ice was safe before they went out. Several people relate it, and the most direct source, he glanced gently at the boy, is Sammy. So I'm going to ask him, with his mom right here. Sammy, you just tell the truth, okay? Nobody's in trouble. The boy looked at his mother. Marin's arm tightened just slightly, a pressure only the boy could feel. "The man said it was safe," Sammy said in the small flat recital of a child saying a memorized thing. "He said the ice was okay to go on." The room went very quiet. "That's not," Hollis started, half out of his chair. "That boy's been coached, you can hear it. Listen to how he's saying." "Mr. Marsh," Reyes held up a hand. "You'll get your turn. Let the record take the boy's account first. The record's going to take a lie is what it's going to take. Mr. Marsh, sit, please." And Hollis sat, jaw working, and Reyes turned back to his pad. "Mr. Odom," Reyes said, "you've heard the account. Do you want to respond? Do you deny telling these boys the ice was safe?" And this was the moment, the single sentence that would have pulled the whole thing apart. "I never spoke to those children. I was inside the co-op. I came out because I heard the ice go." Everyone waited for it. Hollis was vibrating with the need for Jules to say it, and Jules looked across the table at an 8-year-old he'd gone under the ice 3 times to save. A little boy with his mother's arm around him and his mother's fear in his eyes, reciting a lie he didn't understand, and found he could not do it. Because to deny it, he'd have to make that child a liar in front of a room of adults. And because the part no one could see, rooted in a lake 14 years gone, some ruined piece of Jules heard, the man told them it was safe, and thought, with the terrible logic of old guilt, "Yes, that is a thing I did. Maybe not to these boys, but I am a man who told a child the ice was safe. I have always been that man. Maybe I have this coming." The silence stretched. Reyes waited, pen up. "Mr. Odom," Reyes said again, "it's a simple question. Did you tell those children the ice was safe, yes or no?" The whole room waited. Hollis waited. Even Sammy waited, looking up at the huge man he'd said the words about. "The boy's alive," Jules said finally, very low and very level. "Both boys are alive." "That's not what I asked you." "I know it's not. A denial would help you here. I'm giving you the room to make one." "Both boys are alive," Jules said again. "That's the only thing true in here I'm sure of." It was not a denial. Reyes wrote that down too. Pia was waiting up when he got home, which she wasn't supposed to be, and one look at his face told her it had gone badly. "They think you did it," she said. "They think you told them the ice was okay." "The little boy told them I did." "That's a lie." Pia said it with the absolute certainty of a child who has never once had cause to doubt her father. "You have to tell them it's a lie. You have to say you didn't." "I can't call a scared little kid a liar, Pia." "But you didn't say it." And there was something rising in her voice now, the first crack in her certainty. Not doubt in him, but terror at the shape of the thing coming for them. "You would never say that. You would never tell anybody the ice was safe. You don't even walk on the ice. You never... Dad, you never go on the ice. Why won't you just tell them that? Why won't you just say I don't go on ice? Ask anybody." "Because I did once. It came out before he could stop it, and it stopped her cold, and the kitchen went very quiet, and Jules sat down at the table because his legs had decided the conversation for him." "Pia, come here. Sit down." She sat. He turned the awls over in his fingers, the 2 steel picks, the way he did when he was somewhere far away. "You know about Isaac? That he was my little brother, that he died when I was a young man, in the water, under the ice. You said it was an accident." "It was an accident." He looked at the table. "But accidents have a shape, baby. And I've never told you the shape of this one, and I'm going to tell you now, because you're old enough, and because I need you to understand why your dad is sitting here letting a whole town believe a thing that isn't true." He breathed. "I took Isaac out on that lake. It was my idea. He didn't want to go all the way out. He was smart, smarter than me. He heard the ice talking, and he wanted to turn back. He said, 'Jules, it's cracking, let's go in.' And I was 27, and I thought I knew everything, and I wanted to show him it was fine. So I told him." His voice stopped working for a moment. Pia waited. She had learned to wait from him. "I told him the ice was thick. I told him to come out a little farther. I told him it was safe." There were no tears in Jules's eyes, which was somehow worse. The dry, sanded grief of a thing wept out long ago. "I said the exact words that little boy is saying," I said. "It's safe, come on." And the ice opened up, and I couldn't reach him. "Dad, so when they say I did it, some part of me doesn't fight it. Because I'm guilty of it, Pia. Just not here. Not these boys." He looked at her. "But I've got no clean hands to bang on the table with. You understand now? Why I let them believe it?" "No," Pia said, "because that was Isaac. This is you now. They're not the same man." Pia Odom sat with this, her whole small face working, and Jules braced for her to cry, or to pull away, or to look at her father the way he'd been looking at himself for 14 years. She did none of those things. She reached across the table and put her hand flat over his scarred palm, over the all line, and she said in a voice much older than 10, "That's not the same thing. You were a kid too. 27's a kid." And then after a moment, the thing that would set the whole ending in motion. The lady, Sammy's mom. She's making him say it, isn't she? Because you don't make that up. Somebody teached him. Jules didn't answer, but his silence this time was a different kind. And his daughter, who read him the way he read water, saw the current change in it and began quietly to make a plan of her own. What saved Jules Odom was not a person. People had had their chance and mostly hadn't. It was the lake's own memory, kept where no rumor could reach and no frightened mother could edit. Adesi Okafor worked for the state authority that managed the dam, and when children nearly drown on public water, the authority reviews its own operations. Okafor did it the way it was meant to be done, not the convenient way. She cared about numbers, and the numbers were strange. Hollis Marsh had come to her. Hollis, alone among the officials of Harrow Lake, had watched a man do the impossible under that ice and had stopped believing the easy version somewhere around the third rumor. "Your ice should have been 14 inches, Okafor told him. "Mid-January, this latitude, the cold snap you've had, 14, 16 inches. Thick enough to drive a truck on. But 2 boys went through it like paper. And the man who went after them describes current under the ice. Is that unusual? There is not supposed to be current under a frozen lake at all, Mr. Marsh. Still, water freezes still. Moving water is a different animal. So why was it moving?" Okafor turned her monitor toward him. "Because somebody was moving it. That's what I'm going to show you. And once you see it, you're going to understand that this town has been blaming the wrong thing entirely." She pulled up the graph and turned the monitor toward him without a word. One line running flat across the weeks. Then, at a marked date, falling off the edge of the world. Hollis leaned in. He wasn't an educated man, but he'd read enough gauges in 40 years of firefighting to know a cliff when he saw one. That's the ice getting thinner. Thickness at the swimming beach access, every 6 hours, automated. And this, his finger hovered over the date the line began its dive. This is when something changed. He looked up. What changed? Look at the top of the chart, the overlay. He looked. A second line, a schedule, a gate release log. His finger moved from the one to the other, and Okafor watched a volunteer fireman do her job for her. "The dam," Hollis said it slowly. "The dam started letting water out. And the ice started dropping the same day." He frowned. "But water freezes. How does letting it out?" "Moving water," Okafor said. "Just that." And Hollis Marsh, who had pulled a man out of that lake and felt the wrong pull in the current through the boat hook, got there on his own. It's moving underneath. A current, eating the ice from the bottom where nobody can see it while the top still looks solid. He sat back like he'd been pushed. You could stand on it and read 14 inches with your boot and be standing on 2. 2.5, the day those children walked out. Okafor let it land. "So I'll tell you what I'll be telling that council. It did not matter what anyone said to those boys. Safe, dangerous, nothing at all. That ice was going to break under a large dog. The only thing that mattered was whether someone was close enough and skilled enough to go in after them." She closed the laptop. The record shows exactly one person was. While the adults learned to read the lake's memory, Pia Odom did a 10-year-old's version of going through the ice after someone. She did not go to the police. Her father had taught her you don't solve a thing by making more noise than you have to. She went instead to the one person she'd worked out held the whole thing in her hands and waited outside the highway motel an hour and a half in the cold until a tired woman in a housekeeping smock came out to dump a cart. Pia walked up the way her father walked up to things, without drama. "You're Sammy's mom." Marin stopped. She knew instantly whose child this was. The town was small and the resemblance was not. "You shouldn't be here, honey." "My dad went in the water 3 times, Pia said. "I counted. Once for the other boy, twice for Sammy. The current took Sammy under the ice and my dad had to make a new hole with his hands. He came home and couldn't hold his fork. His hands were so cold. He didn't sleep at all." She said it in the flat, factual way she'd learned from him. No accusation in it, which made it worse. "I'm not here to yell. My dad said don't. He doesn't even know I'm here." Marin's hands had gone still on the cart. "Then why are you here?" "Because I want to tell you a thing about my dad, and then I'm going to go home." Pia looked up at her. This small girl in a puffy coat in a motel parking lot in the falling dark. "My dad won't walk on ice. Not ever. Not the pond, not the shortcut, nothing. Everybody in town thinks it's weird. You want to know why he won't?" Marin didn't answer. She couldn't. Because when he was young, he had a little brother. He took him out on the ice, and he told him it was safe, and it wasn't, and his brother died. Pia let that sit. "My dad has never once gotten over telling a kid the ice was safe. Marin's face had gone white. Stop, please stop. So when Sammy says my dad told him the ice was safe, that's the one thing on earth my dad would never do. It's the only rule he has. He'd walk into the water 100 times before he'd tell one kid to go out there. Please. Somebody made Sammy say the exact thing that hurts my dad worse than anything in the world. Pia looked up at her, level, merciless in the way only a truthful child can be. I think you know who. That's all I came to say. Bye. And Pia turned and walked home the long way, around the lake, the way her father had taught her, leaving Marin Voss alone in the dark lot, holding the edge of a cart like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The town council met the second Tuesday of the month in a low brick building with folding chairs, and half of Harrow Lake came because the story of the man who told the boys the ice was safe had become the most interesting thing to happen in years, and everyone wanted to watch it land. Jules came because he'd been asked to, and sat in the back in his good shirt with Pia beside him, expecting nothing from the evening but more of what he'd already had. He had stopped expecting to be believed. He'd carried a thing no one believed for 14 years. He had simply added a new one to the load. Okafor presented first, and did not raise her voice, and did not have to. She put the graph on the wall, ice thickness falling off a cliff the week of the drawdown, and explained, in the flat, unarguable language of an agency with no stake in the town's feelings, what the lake had recorded about itself. The ice at the public access measured 2.5 inches the afternoon of the incident, she said. 4 inches is the minimum considered safe for one person on foot. This was 2.5 and dropping. A council member leaned in. In the account that someone told the boys it was safe? Irrelevant. And I mean that precisely. Okafor didn't blink. No statement by any person could have made that ice safe or unsafe. The ice was a physical fact. It was going to break the moment those children walked past the posted signs, and the signs were posted. Our photo log confirms the thin ice markers were up and visible that morning. So you're saying, I'm saying it does not matter what anyone told those boys. It matters that they went out past a warning onto 2.5 inches of ice, and the only thing that determined whether they came back out of the water was the person who went in after them. Nothing else. The room had gone very quiet. Hollis Marsh, standing along the side wall, was looking at Jules, and so were a few others now. The first uncertain looks of people beginning to suspect they'd helped carry a lie. One more question, a councilman said. You're telling us a co-op maintenance man did what did you call it? A technical under-ice rescue? I'm telling you the individual who entered the water did something this authority would not expect from anyone but a trained ice rescue diver, Okafor said. I don't know his resume. I know what the recovery required, and I know almost no one alive can do it. 2 children are alive because one person could. That's the finding. That's all the data supports, and it supports it completely. She sat down. So the boy's account, a council member started, the one that said, the boy's account describes something that is physically irrelevant, Okafor said. I'll say it a third way if it helps. The ice did not care what anyone said. And into the silence that followed, the silence of a town rearranging what it thought it knew, a woman stood up in the third row, a tired woman in a coat too thin for the weather, and said in a voice that shook so hard it barely carried, It wasn't him. He never said anything to those boys. It was me. Marin Voss stood in a room full of people she'd have to live beside the rest of her life, and said the thing that could cost her the only thing she had. I let them go out. My sitter canceled. I had a shift. I let Sammy go play. Her voice broke. She made herself go on. I told them to stay off the lake, but I didn't watch. I wasn't there. I was cleaning rooms at the motel. Someone in the room said her name, gently. She shook her head. And when it happened, when that man pulled my baby out of the water, I was so scared of losing him. I'm in a custody case. If it came out that he got on that lake because of me, I'd lose my son. She was crying now, the whole room frozen. So I told Sammy to say the man said it was safe. I made my 8-year-old lie about the person who saved his life. Ms. Voss, Reyes started, because I was scared. Because I'm a coward, and that man looked like he could take it, and my boy couldn't. She turned and found Jules in the back row, and said it to him across all those folding chairs. I'm sorry, there's no word big enough. I made him say it. He never said it. I did. It was always me. And here's the thing Harrow Lake would talk about longer than the rescue, because it was stranger and harder to understand. Jules did not look triumphant. He did not stand vindicated. He looked at Marin Voss the way you look at someone across a great distance standing exactly where you once stood, and what was on his face was not anger and not even quite forgiveness. It was recognition, because he knew her, not her name, but the exact thing she'd done, reaching for the nearest way to keep a child, lying because the truth was a thing you could not survive. He'd spent 14 years judging one parent that harshly, and it was himself. He had never once managed to extend himself the grace he suddenly, helplessly felt for this stranger who'd nearly destroyed him. He stood up. The room tensed, waiting for the wronged man to speak, braced for the fury he'd earned. "Ms. Voss," Jules said, "can I talk to you outside?" They stood in the town hall parking lot, in the cold, under a sky going purple, and Pia waited by the truck where her father had told her, close enough to see, far enough not to hear, watching two grown-ups face each other in the dark. "So, you didn't have to do that in there," Jules said. "You could have let the ICE report clear me and kept your secret. Nobody would have known." "I'd have known." Marin wiped her face. "Your girl came to see me. Did you know that? At the motel? She told me why you don't walk on the ice. About your brother." She watched him flinch, just slightly, at the word. "She said you'd walk into the water 100 times before you'd ever tell a kid it was safe. And I'd made my son say you did. I couldn't. After that, I couldn't hold it in my mouth anymore. It was choking me." Jules was quiet for a long moment, and then he did the thing he had never done. Not for Reyes, not for the review, not for the whole watching town. He told the truth about himself out loud to the one person who could not use it against him because she was standing in the same hole. "I know why you did it," he said. "I need you to hear that from me because I don't think anyone's going to say it to you and mean it, and you need to hear it once." He turned the awls over in his fingers. 14 years ago, I took my little brother out on a frozen lake. He was 12. He heard the ice cracking and he wanted to go back, and I told him it was thick. I told him it was safe. I told him to come out a little farther. His voice was steady, sanded flat. The ice opened up and I couldn't reach him and he drowned, and I told myself for 14 years that I was a murderer, that a good man would have listened to a scared kid, that I killed my brother with a sentence. I have carried that exact sentence. It's safe, come on. Every day of my life. And then your son said I said it, and part of me thought yes. Of course, I'm a man who says that. I finally get to be punished for it. Marin was staring at him, her own crisis briefly forgotten in the size of what he was handing her. "So I know what you did in there," Jules said, "and I know what it cost because I've been paying the same bill for 14 years. Then you know I don't deserve. I know you were a scared parent trying to keep your child. That's all you were." "No." He said it steadily. "It doesn't make the lie okay, but it makes you a person, not a monster. And if you spend the next 14 years the way I spent mine, calling yourself the worst word you know, every single day, it will not make your son one bit safer, and it will not bring anything back." "How do you know that?" "Because I did the experiment. 14 years of it." He looked at her. "Don't carry it as long as I did. That's the only thing I want from you. Put it down sooner than I did." Marin Voss put her hand over her mouth and wept, and this time it was a different kind of weeping. And across the lot, a 10-year-old girl watched her father set down, at last, a thing he'd carried her whole life by handing another drowning person the rope he'd never been able to throw himself. Pia was quiet on the drive home. Then, at a red light, she said what she'd been holding. "You forgave her, the lady, right there in the parking lot." "I did. She almost took you away from me. She made her kid lie about you." Pia turned in her seat. "How do you just forgive that?" "Because I finally understood it." Jules watched the light. "She did a terrible thing for the only reason people ever do terrible things, baby. She was scared of losing her kid. I know exactly how that feels. I've been that scared every day of your life. You'd never lie about somebody, though, to keep me. I don't know that. I hope I wouldn't." He pulled through the intersection. "But I know I've never once judged that woman as hard as I've judged the man who told Isaac the ice was safe. And tonight, forgiving her, it was the closest I've ever come to forgiving him. Him being you. Him being me. A long breath. 14 years, Pia. Tonight's the first night it's felt like maybe I can put it down." Pia reached over and took his hand off the gear shift and held it the rest of the way home, and neither of them said anything else, and neither of them needed to. The custody case did not destroy Marin Voss. The truth, told to a room full of witnesses, was a smaller monster than the lies she'd fed. A judge who heard it all, the canceled sitter, the panic, the freely given confession, found a mother who'd made a frightened mistake and then done the hardest right thing there is. Untold a lie that protected her. She kept her son. She and Jules did not become friends. The thing between them was too strange and large for that. But twice that spring, she left a foil-covered dish on his porch without knocking, and he understood it. And that was its own kind of language. Jules never took anything for the rescue. The paper called, he said no. The county floated a commendation, a plaque, a podium. He let it be known he would not be there, and they stopped asking. He hadn't gone under the ice to have his name said. He'd gone under it because once he hadn't, and a boy he loved had paid, and no plaque in the world spoke to that. But something had changed, and Pia was the one who noticed it, because Pia noticed everything about her father. In the spring, when the ice went off Harrow Lake, not melting so much as vanishing, the way lake ice does, solid 1 week and simply gone the next, the black water opening back up to the sky, Jules took his daughter down to the shore. He'd walked around this lake 3 years and never once stood at its edge by choice. He stood at its edge now. The open water moved a little in the wind, ordinary, unremarkable, a lake like any lake. "You okay, Dad?" Pia asked. "Yeah," and the strange thing was that it was true. "I think I am." He crouched at the very edge and did a thing Pia had never seen. He took the cord from around his neck, the 2 awls, the picks that meant awls down, "You come up," and held them in his open hand. He did not throw them in. That would have been a letting go, and this was not that. He just held them, looking at the open water where a lake had twice tried to take a child and twice been made to give one back.